Hello everyone, Archana is here. Welcome to the ninth session of presentation in English. In today's session, let us continue with the chapter 4, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Forest by Vandana Shiva. Before we continue, let's recapitulate the previous session. In previous session, we learned about the author Vandana Shiva. She was born in 1952 and she is a world-renowned environmental leader and thinker, director of the Research Foundation on Science, Technology and Ecology. She is the author of many books including Staying Alive, Women, Ecology and Development, Soil Not Oil, Climate Change, Peak Oil and Food Insecurity, Earth, Democracy, Justice, Sustainability and Peace, Water Wars, Privatization, Pollution and Profit, Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, Monocultures of the Mind and the Violence of the Green Revolution. Vandana Shiva is a leader in the International Forum in Globalization. In 1993, she won the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize, the Right Livelihood Award. In 2010, she was awarded the Sydney Peace Prize for her commitment to social justice. The founder of Navadanya, Nine Seeds, a movement promoting diversity and use of native seeds, she also set up the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology in her mother's cowshed in 1997. Its studies have validated the ecological value of traditional farming and been instrumental in fighting destructive development projects in India. The whole lesson talks about environmental concepts like biodiversity, earth as a living organism, earth democracy, ecological sustainability, etc. In the first part of the lesson, the writer narrates how she learned the basic principles of ecology. She says that her study of ecology started in the forests of the Himalaya because her father was a forest conservator. Hence, she declares that whatever she knows about ecology was learned from the Himalayan forests and ecosystems. Incidentally, her mother, who was brought up in Lahore, which became Pakistan later, settled in India after partition and became a farmer. In the next few paragraphs, she narrates the history of Chipko movement. It was a non-violent response to the large-scale deforestation that was taking place in the Himalayan region in the 1970s. In this context, Vandana Shiva tells us that her involvement in the contemporary ecological movement began with the Chipko movement. During this period, the peasant women from the Garhwal Himalaya had come out in defense of the forest, protesting against the ruthless cutting down of trees on a large scale for logging. This has resulted in landslides and floods, scarcity of water, fodder, and fuel. Consequently, women had become the worst sufferers because they were in charge of fulfilling the daily requirements for cooking, washing, and other household chores. They had to walk long distances for collecting water and firewood, which was a heavy burden for them. Fortunately, the women had realized that the forests were the real source of springs and streams, food for their cattle, and fuel for their hearts. Therefore, the women declared that they would hug the trees and the loggers would have to kill them before killing the trees. They appealed to the loggers not to cut them and to keep those trees alive. In 1973, she went to the Himalaya to visit her favorite forest and swim in her favorite stream. She wanted to see these spots before leaving for Canada to do her PhD, but the forests were not there and the stream had become a trickle. It was at this moment that she decided to become a volunteer for the Chipko movement. She spent every vacation doing Padayatra, walking pilgrimages, documenting the deforestation, the work of the forest activists, and spreading the message of Chipko. Next, the author narrates the Chipko action that took place in the Himalayan village of Advani in 1977. She recalls how a village woman named Bachni Devi led her movement of resistance against her own husband, who had obtained a contract to cut trees. When the logging officials arrived at the forest, the women held up lighted lanterns, although it was broad daylight. The forester admonished them, saying that they were foolish women and did not know the value of the forest. He added that the forest produced a profit, resin, and timber. The women sang back in chorus, replying that the forests were bore soils. Forests bore soils, water, and pure air, and also sustain the earth and all that she bears. In the next section, titled Beyond Monocultures, Vandana Shiva tells the readers that she learned about biodiversity and biodiversity based living economies from the Chipko movement. Further, she remarks that our failure to understand biodiversity and its many functions is a root cause of the impoverishment of nature and culture. Then she says that the lessons she learned about diversity is the Himalayan forest. She transferred to the protection of biodiversity on her farms. She started saving seeds from farmers' fields and incidentally realized that they needed a farm for demonstration and training. This led to the establishment of Navadanya farm. She declares that now they conserve and grow 630 varieties of rice, 150 varieties of wheat, and hundreds of other species. She proudly says that they practice and promote a biodiversity intensive form of farming that produces more food and nutrition per acre. Finally, she observes that the conservation of biodiversity is therefore the answer to the food and nutrition crisis being faced in our country. The Navadanya organization helps farmers make a transition from fossil fuel and chemical based monocultures to biodiverse ecological systems nourished by the sun and the soil. She concludes saying that biodiversity has been her teacher of abundance and freedom, of cooperation and mutual giving. The second part of the lesson begins with the title Rights of Nature on the Global Stage. In the first section, she suggests that we accept nature as a teacher. And when we do so, we co create with her and also recognize her agency and her rights. Incidentally, she says that Ecuador has recognized the rights of nature in its constitution and calls it a significant step. As a sequel, the United Nations General Assembly organized a conference on harmony with nature as part of Earth Day celebrations in April 2011. She makes a reference to the report of the UN Secretary General titled Harmony with Nature that was issued in conjunction with the conference. The report highlighted the importance of reconnecting with nature. Vandana Shiva opines that separatism is indeed at the root of disharmony with nature and violence against nature and people. The author supports her statement citing the opinion of Cormac Cullinan, a prominent South African environmentalist. According to him, apartheid means separateness. The author says that the whole world joined the anti apartheid movement in order to end the violent separation of people, separatism, that is, separateness of people on the basis of color. Now, that apartheid in South Africa has been put behind us. We need to overcome the wider and deeper apartheid and eco apartheid based on the illusion of separateness of humans from nature in our minds and lives. The author makes an attempt to trace the origin of the idea of separateness. The author recalls our beliefs about the earth in the pre industrial era when man believed that living beings were an inseparable part of nature. But later, with the advent of scientific thinking, man came under the illusion that the living earth was dead matter. The living earth was dead matter, and there was no connection between the living earth and the other living creatures. Vandana Shiva remarks that it was at this moment in history that the war against the earth began. She observes that the seeds of separateness were sown when the living earth was considered as a dead matter to facilitate the industrial revolution. He adds here that monocultures replaced diversity. She says that monocultures replaced diversity, raw materials and dead matter replaced vibrant earth. The earth came to be termed as terra nullius, which means empty land ready for occupation, regardless of the fact that the mother earth, terra madre, was home to tens of thousands of indigenous peoples, people of different races, tribes or ethnicities, indigenous peoples. And Vandana Shiva next mentions Caroline Merchant, a philosopher and historian, in her support and says that this shift of perspective from nature as a living, nurturing mother to inert dead and manipulable matter, was well suited to the activities that led to capitalism. Furthermore, Vandana Shiva says that the images of domination of the earth by scientific methods created by Francis Bacon and other leaders of the scientific revolution replaced the idea that the earth nurtures life for living beings. They also successfully removed a cultural constraint on the exploitation of nature. Until then, people did not dare to readily slay a mother, dig into her entrails for gold, or mutilate her body as absorbed by merchant. It is to be inferred here that once Francis Bacon popularized the idea that the earth can serve as a source of raw materials for scientific experiments, many new scientific discoveries and inventions were made, which later led to the exploitation of iron, gold, copper, wood, and metals from the earth, and heralded the industrial revolution, modernization, growth of cities, increase in the number of rich people, and urban culture, displacing other cultures. In the next section, titled What Nature Teaches, Vandana Shiva tells the reader what we need to do now. She says that we are facing multiple crises and hence we need to move away from the paradigm of nature as dead matter and move towards an ecological paradigm. Vandana Shiva tells us that to understand what an ecological paradigm means, we need to go to nature herself, and nature is the best teacher. Vandana Shiva presents a model of the Earth University, which says which she says that it is located at Navadanya, a biodiversity farm. She says that Earth University teaches Earth democracy. The concept of Earth democracy symbolizes freedom for all species to evolve within the web of life. It also refers to the freedom and responsibilities of humans as members of the Earth family to recognize, protect, and respect the rights of other species. Vandana Shiva explains that the idea of Earth democracy is a shift from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism is a school of thought which argues that humans are the central element of the universe. What is anthropocentrism? It is a school of thought which argues that humans are the central element of the universe. Now, we need to accept that ecosystems are the main elements of the universe and not man. And the earth nurtures diverse ecosystems. It also means that it is man's responsibility to preserve these ecosystems since we all depend on the earth for our survival. Earth democracy gives every human being rights to food and water, to freedom from hunger and thirst. Vandana Shiva mentions the activities of Navadanya. She says that it is a biodiversity form where participants learn to work with living seeds, living soil, and the web of life. In the next section, titled The Poetry of the Forest, Vandana Shiva talks about the original source of the idea of the Earth University. She states that the concept of Earth University originated from Rabindranath Tagore's Shantiniketan in West Bengal. Tagore started a learning center in Shantiniketan in West Bengal as a forest school. The school became a university in 1921, growing into one of India's most famous centers of learning. Vandana takes this forest school as a model and tells the readers that just as in Tagore's time, we need to turn to nature and the forest for lessons in freedom. Then she refers to Tagore's essay, Tapovan, which means forest of purity. What is Tapovan? Tapovan means forest of purity, in which Tagore has expressed his understanding of the Indian civilization. Tagore asserts that India's best ideas have come from where the man was in communion with trees and rivers and lakes away from the crowds. He adds that the peace of the forest has helped the intellectual evolution of man. Furthermore, he says that the culture that has arisen from the forest has been influenced by the diverse process of renewal of life, and these processes of renewal of life are always at play in the forest, varying from season to season in sight, sound, and smell. This culture of the forest has fueled the culture of Indian society. Vandana Shiva says that unity in diversity is a basis of both ecological sustainability and democracy. She adds that this is true of both nature and culture, and through our relationship with the forest, we are united with nature. In The Religion of the Forest, Tagore wrote about the influence that the forest dwellers of ancient India had no classical Indian literature. The forests are sources of water and the storehouses of a biodiversity that can teach us the lessons of democracy, of living space for others while drawing sustenance from the common web of life. Tagore saw unity with nature as the highest stage of human evolution. So it is this unity in diversity that is the basis of both ecological sustainability and democracy. Diversity without unity becomes a source of conflict and contest. So unity without diversity becomes a ground for external control. For example, if we fight ourselves, so the outsiders will definitely take the advantage. So in the same way, unity without diversity becomes a ground for external control. This is true of both nature and culture. The forest is a unity in its diversity, and we are united with nature through our relationship with the forest. In Tagore's writings, the forest was not just the source of knowledge and freedom. So here Vandana Shiva further elaborates the features of the culture of the forest. She refers to Tagore's writings and says that in his writings, the forest was not just the source of knowledge and freedom, but was also the source of beauty and joy, of art and aesthetics, of harmony and protection. It symbolizes the universe. Vandana Shiva says that the forest teaches us union and compassion. What does the forest teach us? It teaches us union and compassion. It also teaches us enoughness. It means it teaches us the principle of equity. It shows us how to enjoy the gifts of nature without exploitation, without spoiling the nature. Furthermore, she says that no species in a forest takes away the share of another species, and every species sustains itself in cooperation with others. She concludes saying that the end of consumerism and accumulation is the beginning of the joy of living. Finally, Vandana rounds off her article saying that the conflict between greed and compassion, conquest and cooperation, violence and harmony continues even today in this situation. It is the forest that can show us the way beyond this conflict. Thus, Vandana Shiva wants to assure us that the forests teach us the values of diversity, freedom, and coexistence. So, here we have wound up this session. So let us just summarize this today's session. So the United Nations General Assembly organized a conference on harmony with nature as part of Earth Day celebration. It is significant to note that Ecuador has recognized the rights of nature in its constitution. The discussion was about the ways to transform systems based on domination of people over nature, men over women, and rich over poor, into new systems based on partnership. The importance of reconnecting with nature is stressed. All human beings are an inseparable part of nature, and if we do any harm to nature, it is harming ourselves. So karmic Kalinan says that we need to overcome the wider and deeper appetite and eco appetite based on the illusion of separateness of humans from nature in our minds and lives. Today, it is the need of our to stop thinking that our living earth is transformed into dead matter. One should look at nature as a living, nurturing mother. We need to move away from the paradigm of nature as dead matter. We should take a shift from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism. We should recognize, protect, and respect the rights of other species. Tagore, in his essay, Tapovan, speaks of the forest as the source of regeneration and the source of India's best ideas. The peace of the forest has helped the intellectual evolution of man. He speaks of unity in diversity and the forest as a source of knowledge and freedom. The forest teaches us union and compassion. We have to enjoy the gifts of nature without exploitation and accumulation. We should find enjoyment through renunciation and certainly not through greed of possession. If at all we want the joy of living, if at all we want the joy of living, we need to put an end to consumerism and accumulation. Thus, Vandana Shiva says that the forest teach us the values of diversity, freedom and coexistence. So here, to conclude the complete concept in few lines, I would like to put it in this way. The forest is defined as a complex ecosystem which consists of mainly of trees that helps to protect the earth. The forest helps to support a variety of life forms. The trees which are present helps to create a special soothing environment which influence and affects the kinds of animals and plants which can exist in the forest. Trees are an important component of the environment in the forest ecosystems. The trees clean the air and cools it on hot days and conserve a large amount of heat at night and act as an excellent sound absorbers in the forest. So here we have winded up the chapter. Home assignment. Answer the following questions in a paragraph about 80 to 100 words. First question, explain the idea of separateness as perceived by Vandana Shiva. Second question, bring out the significance of the rights of nature as explained by Vandana Shiva in her essay. Main question number 2, answer the following questions in a paragraph about 200 words. Third question, how does Rabindranath Tagore highlight the importance of forests according to Vandana Shiva? Thank you all.